I often think back to when life felt simpler and our relationship was filled with shared dreams and laughter. Susan and I used to sit on the porch, drinking coffee and discussing our future. We were young, ambitious, and always made time for each other despite our busy schedules. But over the years, our careers took over, and we gradually grew apart. We ignored the growing distance, always focusing on the next project or deadline. And now it feels like we're lost in our separate worlds, struggling to reconnect. I can't shake the unease I've been feeling lately. Susan spent months doing fieldwork in a remote Utah community, deeply absorbed in her PhD research. Since she returned, she's been consumed by her thesis, spending all her time in her study, leaving our home quiet and distant. I find myself alone at my desk, grappling with the growing distance between us. I feel like Susan's ignoring my efforts to address our issues, and I'm running out of ways to bridge the gap. Now, a bit about us. I'm Ethan Allen, a geologist working in oil exploration. I'm good at what I do and was recruited right out of grad school. Susan, my wife, is an academic passionate about research and teaching. We met in college in Colorado, married 5 years ago, and both pursued our master's degrees, hers in sociology, mine in geology. Despite our different paths, we've always supported each other. But lately, things have changed. Susan spent 2 months in Utah for her research, much longer than planned. She didn't keep in touch, claiming she had no access to phones or email, which seemed unlikely. When she returned, she locked herself in the study to focus on her thesis, and communication between us has been minimal. I've tried to reach out, but it feels like she's keeping me at a distance. She's researching a splinter group from the Mormon Church in a closed community, and while I understand the importance of her work, the way she's handling it is pushing us further apart. I started to question whether my perception of that closed community was accurate. How did Susan, an outsider, manage to gain their trust for so long? Maybe they made an exception for her. Did they know she was researching them? These questions puzzled me, but Susan refused to discuss anything related to her research. I admire her dedication to completing her PhD, but something feels off since she returned. Her lack of communication bothers me, and when I brought it up, she got irritated, implying I didn't understand the complexity of her work. She wouldn't discuss her 2-month stay at all. Before leaving, she had shared her research plan with me. Now, after finishing her fieldwork, she won't talk about it. I felt excluded from this part of our life. Simple, non-threatening questions seemed like a big deal to her. For the first time in our marriage, I felt Susan was hiding something significant. The tension between us kept growing, and she became increasingly secretive. She promised to explain everything after her thesis was done, but that offered me no comfort. Why not tell me now? The first thing I noticed when I returned was her drastic change in appearance. Before, she dressed like any 26-year-old woman, stylish but not too revealing. Now, she wears ultra-conservative clothing, long dresses that cover her neck and ankles, and she stopped wearing makeup and perfume. Her once beautiful hair is now rolled up in a bun. When I commented on her new look, she brushed it off, saying she liked the more conservative style and that it helped her stay in the mindset for her research. At night, it was no different. She wore plain, long nightgowns and refused any closeness, claiming it would interfere with her emotions and research. Despite my efforts, she remained distant, more focused on her thesis than our relationship. Our house no longer felt like home. Susan had also picked up a stomach infection during her research trip. She was frequently nauseated but refused to see a doctor, saying she felt better now. Her sudden and intense focus on finishing her thesis surprised me, especially since she had 2 years left to complete it. When I questioned her rush, she said she wanted to return to high school teaching in the fall and needed her degree by then. While that explanation made some sense, it didn't fully add up. We always discussed major decisions together, but now she was making them on her own, further straining our marriage. When I asked where she was applying for a teaching job, she said she hadn't decided yet and was too busy to look into it. I offered to help, but she firmly told me not to interfere and that she would handle it in her own time. Susan's focus on completing her thesis and earning her degree seemed to overshadow everything else, including our relationship. I felt excluded from her decisions, and it worried me that she didn't see how deeply connected we are. Her choices affected me, yet I had no say. Time passed, and our conversations remained superficial. While her health improved, our marriage continued to fall apart. I stayed busy with my work as a research geologist, but Susan refused to discuss any plans, leaving me unable to coordinate my upcoming trips with her. Our life together was unraveling. Despite the growing distance, I tiptoed around her, feeling excluded from her world. My anxiety grew, even causing physical symptoms. I needed structure and hated surprises, but Susan was turning my life into a chaotic mess of unknowns. I started to fear she was abandoning me for her academic pursuits, and it left me feeling miserable. In the evenings, I would try to engage her in conversation, asking about her progress. But when I probed into her living arrangements during her research, she became defensive and angry. She refused to answer any questions until her thesis was done, which only fueled my suspicions and frustration. Our once loving marriage was deteriorating. We hadn't been lovemaking since before we both left for our trips. She claimed that any physical contact would taint her research, which made me question the nature of her work. If sex with her husband could interfere with her research, what exactly had she been doing? I began to wonder if she had broken her promises of fidelity. Her refusal to discuss anything only made things worse. She moved my workspace into the dining room and locked me out of the den. When I directly asked if she had been unfaithful, she reacted with hostility, insisting she wouldn't discuss her research until her dissertation was complete. It was clear that our marriage was in serious trouble. My stomach churned with anxiety, and I dreaded coming home. I felt like Susan was no longer mine, but rather consumed by her degree. Our once happy marriage was slipping away, and I couldn't help but wonder if other couples faced the same struggles when one partner was focused on a thesis. Her self-imposed deadlines only made everything more difficult. After a particularly tense argument, I reached my breaking point. "Susan," I said angrily, "you've ruined our trust and communication. I think our marriage is nearly over, and it's your fault." I kept criticizing her, then stormed out, driving aimlessly to calm down. As I drove, I tried to sort through my thoughts. Susan claimed she still loved me and hoped I loved her too. I reassured her that I did, but I hated how she was treating me. She refused to talk about important things, like our marriage and her fidelity. My anxiety grew as I wondered if she had been unfaithful or crossed boundaries for her research. I couldn't keep living in this turmoil and knew something had to change soon, whether by her or by me. I considered leaving her and starting over, but couldn't imagine life without her. Deciding to investigate on my own, I thought about contacting someone at her university who might help. Reflecting on her behavior, her drastic changes in appearance and the refusal of closeness for months were alarming. The woman I loved had transformed into someone unrecognizable. She showed little interest in my life or feelings, and our physical and emotional connection had vanished. I started avoiding her, which only deepened the distance between us. Her use of a locked door and password-protected computer added to my suspicions. When I confronted her, she dismissed my concerns, saying I didn't need to worry about her work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Despite her reassurances, my distrust continued to grow. She refused to share any details about her research, claiming it would disrupt her progress. This secrecy was new and unsettling in our marriage. I told her I felt shut out, but she brushed it off as insignificant. As I tried to cope with the situation, I considered my boss's suggestion to speak with her major professor. I made an appointment and decided to investigate our finances and her computer in the meantime. Finding nothing unusual in our bank accounts, I arranged for a tech expert to help me access her computer while she was out. I felt uneasy about snooping, but needed answers that Susan wouldn't give me. The opportunity came when Susan told me she had to meet with her thesis committee the following Tuesday, giving me the time I needed to dig deeper. With the help of my tech friend, I planned to uncover whatever secrets Susan was hiding. That Tuesday morning, nothing changed. There was no closeness, no real affection, just the same distant behavior. Susan continued wearing oversized, conservative clothing that hid her figure. I decided to be patient a bit longer while gathering more information, but I knew I would soon confront her, or I'd consider divorce. Fortunately, we had no children. I met Professor Young in his office. He was polite and confirmed that he was Susan's thesis advisor. He also verified that she had a research expense account, but he didn't know if she had submitted any expenses. His secretary later provided me with a detailed account. When I asked about the unexpected twist in her research, he acknowledged it but said Susan should explain it to me. He mentioned that her research required revisions, but her committee supported her work. He advised me as a husband to have a deep discussion with Susan about everything that happened during her research, emphasizing the importance of forgiveness in marriage. His words only increased my anxiety and suspicions. I also asked about her communication setup, and he confirmed that she had been using her audio equipment to stay in touch with her committee. When I inquired about her living arrangements during the research, he told me she would cover that in her presentation but couldn't discuss it without her consent. He found it odd that she had asked him not to talk to me about it, further heightening my concerns. As I left, the secretary handed me a file with Susan's financial records, which I kept for later review. Driving home, my suspicions grew. Professor Young hadn't eased my worries. Instead, my paranoia deepened. There was no concrete proof of infidelity, but the secrecy raised red flags. At home, I hid the file in my desk and didn't mention my meeting with the professor to Susan. It was the first time I kept something significant from her, and it made me feel uneasy. We had a brief conversation, but the tension remained. I told her that her behavior was leading me to suspect infidelity and that it needed to change or our marriage would end. She just grimaced and gave a forced smile, promising to explain everything once her thesis was approved. On the day of her thesis defense, Susan dressed in the same conservative attire. I suggested she dress up for such an important event, but she dismissed my concerns, saying that her appearance didn't matter in her field. After she left, I called my tech friend, who was ready to help. He arrived with his equipment and quickly accessed Susan's computer, copying all her emails, files, and even deleted data. He erased any trace of our investigation and advised me to store the backup disks in a secure location. I rented a safety deposit box and placed the disks there, knowing that whatever was on them could potentially destroy our marriage. When my wife returned that evening, she seemed happy. She had eaten in the city and called to tell me to grab a burger for dinner. I asked about her thesis critique and she smiled, saying it went better than expected. Her thesis was accepted for publication, and her final jobs were completed. She was thrilled and said, "I'm almost done. There won't be any more problems." She was almost dancing with excitement. "See, I told you my dress didn't matter. My research spoke for itself." I congratulated her repeatedly, but when I tried to hug and kiss her, she turned away. "I can't kiss you like we used to," she murmured. Confused and frustrated, I asked, "Your degree is secure, and your research is complete. Why can't we focus on our marriage now?" She pulled away, saying, "We can't go back." I pressed her for answers, asking if our marriage was over, but she only asked for one more week to handle grant finances and graduation fees. Frustrated, I accused her of delaying and stringing me along. Another argument ensued, and I reluctantly agreed to wait. I warned her that if she delayed again, I'd start looking for a divorce lawyer. I went out for a long walk, angry and on edge. That night was rough. I couldn't sleep, and Susan seemed restless too. Early the next morning, I noticed a change in her body. Her stomach, usually flat, had a small, smooth bump. Horrified, I realized she was pregnant. Given the timing, the child couldn't be mine. She must have been pregnant before she returned home, and her secrecy now made sense. Overcome with rage, I violently shook her awake. She screamed, trying to escape, but I held her down. "You're pregnant with another man's baby?" I yelled. "No more delays. You're going to tell me everything now." I stormed out, slammed the door, and tried to calm down by making coffee, but my anger only grew. I smashed a glass in frustration, knowing this was the worst day of my life. When I called Susan to the table, she entered, visibly scared and dressed in her usual drab clothing. I demanded that she put on something decent, but she confessed her old clothes no longer fit due to her pregnancy. She admitted she knew she was pregnant from the day she returned but had kept it from me, unable to face it. Susan explained that she believed the pregnancy was a result of attacks during her research trip. She was coerced into sex by Henry, the head of the family she stayed with, and felt trapped. She couldn't escape or seek help because his family controlled the local authorities. She described how the situation spiraled into more forced and eventually voluntary encounters, leaving her with no choice but to submit. She began to sob, and my anger eased. If she had been attacked, it changed everything. I had always dismissed such stories, thinking they didn't happen in America, but now I had first-hand evidence. While I silently planned to seek revenge, I needed her to tell me everything first. "I'm sorry you were attacked," I said more gently, "but that doesn't explain why you refused closeness with me or why you continued seeing him voluntarily. It doesn't explain your new habits or secrecy either. There has to be more. Keep talking," I urged. "Our marriage is still in trouble, but you're redeeming yourself a little." She cried more, and I couldn't tell if it was from guilt or because she was caught. "I'm trying, Evan. This is so hard. I had planned to explain everything in stages, but you forced me to start now. Please let me tell you everything in the order I intended." I hesitated, but agreed. "Okay, but it all has to come out today. No dragging this out. Yes, everything today, I promise, she replied. Susan, before we continue, I need to tell you I've been investigating. I talked to your professor and copied everything on your computer. You have one chance to be completely honest with me. I retrieved a tape recorder, set it up, and turned it on. I also took her cell phone and turned it off, ensuring there would be no interruptions. Then she began her story. Susan, I interrupted, are you telling me you grew up in one of those polygamous families? Yes, Evan. My mother was the fourth wife in a family like the one I researched. When I was 11, she escaped with me. We fled one night, leaving everything behind, and eventually found refuge in Colorado. That's where we built a new life, and I never talked about it until now. She paused, and I could tell she was exhausted. She asked for a break, and we went for a walk. For the first time since her return, she held my hand. Afterward, we sat back down with some water and fruit. My childhood experiences shaped my academic interests, she continued. I wanted to understand that world from an adult perspective. The next part will be harder for you to hear, but I'll be as honest as I can. She explained that the family she stayed with was part of her childhood family. They were suspicious of her return, but she managed to stay by pretending she might come back permanently. The head of the family, Henry, was a tall, muscular man in his 50s, used to absolute control. He laid down strict rules, including that she had to give up her wedding ring. Reluctantly, she complied, knowing she had no choice if she wanted to stay and complete her research. Her voice trembled as she recalled the memory. He asked what was in my backpack. I told him it had my clothes, personal items, and my computer. He took the computer and smashed it with a hoe, then threw it away. He also took my purse and the $1,000 inside, saying women weren't allowed money in his house. I was glad I had hidden cash near the bus station. It became clear that I was more of a captive than a guest. Needing his approval for my research, I agreed to all his terms. She looked at me, her voice softening. Losing the computer is why I secluded myself when I returned home. I had to reconstruct everything from memory, including my emotional reactions, which were crucial to my research. That caused me a lot of anxiety, both there and here. But that was just a small part of my overall stress. I agreed to follow all the community's rules without causing any disruption, which aligned with my research goals. You might wonder why Henry let me stay as an outsider. The only reason was that Henry was related to me by family, not blood. He's 20 years older than me, and became the head of our family after my father passed away. When I arrived, I was given a bed in the attic with his other wives. Henry slept downstairs, and the children slept with us. I was to work like the other women, dress like them, and obey all the rules. She paused, then continued. The first wife inspected my suitcase and found my birth control pills. She threw them out, saying they were unnatural and against God's will. My underclothes were also taken and burned. I had to wear plain white cotton garments. I couldn't protest. I had to follow their rules or leave. She looked at me with resignation. That night, I didn't think much of losing the pills since we weren't together. I planned to start them again once I got home. I settled into a routine and gradually gained the wives' trust, allowing me to gather a lot of information. I couldn't keep a diary, so I had to rely on memory. That's why I needed so much privacy after I returned. As she spoke, I jotted down notes. She continued. In my second week, Henry announced he would take me as his fourth wife. I was shocked, but he didn't care that I was already married. He said God had revealed to him that I was to be his wife. When I protested, he became aggressive, dragged me to his bedroom, and threatened violence if I didn't comply. He attacked me, and after that, I knew I was trapped. She took a breath, her voice shaking. From then on, he treated me as his wife. He was controlling and dominant, and I eventually became submissive. Over time, I began to accept and even enjoy the role. I started to disconnect from my life with you and embrace this new reality. The other wives shared similar experiences. After weeks of being confined, Henry allowed me to leave the house to visit other families. By then, I had gathered a lot of information for my research. I also became the community's teacher, developing lesson plans that conformed to their strict beliefs. My role there became crucial for my research, and I was fully accepted as part of their world. Her voice grew quieter as she added, One night after a party for Henry's daughter, I saw my chance to escape. I grabbed my hidden credit card, left a note, and walked the road my mother and I had taken years ago. After nearly 8 miles, I was exhausted, but I managed to catch a ride to the bus station. I retrieved the cash I had hidden, and you know the rest. I returned home and started documenting everything. I secluded myself to focus on writing, blocking out all emotions, including our relationship, she sighed, looking drained. That's why I needed so much privacy. My mind had to be free from any emotional distractions, including sex with you. Now, my dear husband, this next part is even harder. Do you want to ask questions or should I continue? I decided to let her continue, feeling that our marriage was already beyond saving. She went on, I've had time to reflect on the two lifestyles I've experienced. They're very different, each with its own pros and cons. Honestly, I'm drawn to the rural communal life. The idea of multiple wives has its benefits, and I've explored this in my thesis. I'm also writing a novel based on my experiences and already received a $50,000 advance for it. I've been very busy these past few months, she continued. Ethan, the wives got along well, even competing to satisfy their husband. What once drove my mother and me to flee now seems less serious after reflection. I believe people need to fit into their culture to be happy. I've come to accept their way of life, even if it contradicts the values of the society you and I used to live in. I interrupted. So, attacking doesn't bother you anymore? That's not just wrong. It's evil. She ignored my comment and carried on. Let me explain why I haven't had marital relations with you. I was worried that if we had sex, it would cloud my memories of the encounters with Henry that I needed for my research. Then, the pregnancy made me lose interest in sex. Over time, I realized I was torn between two very different cultures and two very different men. I couldn't continue like this. In the outside world, I'm married to you, and we share tender, gentle love. But with Henry, I was submissive, and that experience became more fulfilling for me. I craved the wild, dominant sex with him, and now that my thesis is complete, I need to decide. Do I stay with you or return to Henry? I can't have both. If I return to him, I must be faithful to him and cannot have been with you. If I stay with you, you'll have to accept that I'm carrying his child. I'm still wearing your wedding band because Henry made me wear it. He didn't buy a new one since he already had it. While the relationship started with attack, I later willingly engaged in the dominant submissive dynamic with him. It was exciting and new to me. Now I have to choose between you and this society or him and his community. It's not an easy decision. She paused before continuing. I've told my thesis committee everything, including how I learned to enjoy that dynamic. They know I'm pregnant, but it doesn't affect them academically. Now I'm ready to answer your questions. I just hope you'll be civil, as I have been. I sat quietly, processing her words. My mind cleared quickly. I realized I didn't need the information from her computer or the grant records. The tape recorder would suffice. I took a deep breath and spoke, trying to control my anger. You've left me out of your decision-making completely. You've forgotten your wedding vows, to have and to hold, forsaking all others until end of life. Yet you took another lover, had a child with him, and destroyed our marriage. You've pushed me out of your life, and now your option to remain my wife no longer exists. I've decided that our marriage is over. I continued. Your options are now limited. You can try to go back to Henry, who might take you back, or you can raise this child alone, like your mother did. Whatever you choose, you'll do it without my help. I won't support you or the child financially or emotionally. You've tortured me for months, and now our relationship is dead. You eliminated it. Tomorrow, I'll see a divorce lawyer. You chose research and infidelity over our marriage, and now you must live with the consequences. You used me while giving your heart and body to another man. Don't expect me to pay a dowry for someone else to take you off my hands. I let out a harsh, angry laugh. How do you expect me to do that? I asked. She snapped back. I have my own grant money and the advance on my novel. I don't need anything from your precious bank account. I can take care of myself. Susan, you've used me, not loved me, I replied. My hard work funded your research, while your grant only covered tuition. I paid for everything else without questioning you. You've been unfaithful not just physically, but financially. Did you marry me just to make your life easier and get your degree? You've broken my heart, and it seems you don't even care. You lied when you said you loved me. I've lost any desire to be around you. She winced and shook her head. Ethan, I did love you all these years. I hoped you would accept me. I'm torn inside too. I wanted you to show your love by being faithful without all the complaining, she said. But you let your emotions ruin our marriage, I retorted. You broke my heart and you can't fix it. You don't understand love or fidelity. Did you want me to accept your infidelity as a sign of love? What kind of monster have you become? You're like him now. She had shared everything with her academic peers, but kept it from me. I realized I had always been just a sideline in her life. "Are you going back to him? Do you even know what your penance will be?" I asked. "He won't tell you. He'll probably strike you half to end of life to set an example. You escaped once, but that won't happen again. If you go back, you might die there, and if you do, they'll cover it up. He'll see it as his right to discipline you. If you go back, you're risking your life and the life of your child. I won't be a part of it." I had no idea if what I said was true, but I wanted to scare her. I wasn't thinking of reconciliation. I just wanted to hurt her like she hurt me. "You think you can take care of yourself? You'll find out if you go back. If you value your life, be very careful." I couldn't understand how someone so intelligent could even consider returning to that life. Was she mentally ill? The idea of her turning her back on everything for a domineering man was baffling. I got up and walked around, feeling the weight of it all. The sun had set on our marriage. "Susan, this morning I was just angry. Now I'm exhausted and defeated. I'm numb. I feel some relief because at least I have closure. Now I need to figure out how to live without you. You no longer exist to me." I spoke quietly, drained of emotion. I felt old and broken. I no longer cared to attack her or argue. I just wanted her gone, out of my life entirely. She sat silently, staring at the wall. I went out for a walk to clear my head, knowing there was unfinished business. She had created her own punishment, but there was a man who still needed to feel the consequences of crossing me. I was determined to seek justice. I slept on the couch. The next morning, I called in for 2 weeks' leave. Susan had made coffee. "Enjoy it, Susan," I said. "You won't get any when you go back. There are plenty of things you won't enjoy, but you'll have your dominant Zex. We'll be divorced soon. Keep your $50,000, but don't expect any part of this house. It's going on the market today. I had plans for Henry that I wasn't going to share. Get ready to live somewhere else. I'm moving to the corporate apartment this afternoon. I'll get the rest of my things soon. From now on, we communicate through lawyers. Here's your cell phone." I packed in silence, taking the tapes in case we ended up fighting over the divorce. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing good about this. She was just another obstacle to remove from my life. The next day, I closed our bank accounts and moved the money to new accounts. I canceled our joint credit card and applied for a new one. I met with a divorce lawyer and arranged everything. My boss was supportive and promised to help however he could. I told him all I needed was for my paycheck to go to my new account and some time off. If Susan called, the secretaries could give her my new number and I'd handle it from there. That took up my entire day. The next day, I went back to my former home. Susan wasn't there. I collected the tape recorder, the tapes, my books, files, clothes, tools, pictures, personal items, and my cello. I also contacted the realtor to update my address and phone number. They informed me they couldn't list the house without Susan's signature. Fine, let her handle the mortgage, the lawn, and the broken bathroom toilet. I left Susan a note with my new contact info, though I doubted she'd reach out. I mentioned I wanted to talk, not about the divorce, but about Henry. The more I knew about him, the better my chances of devising a successful plan. I was now determined to see Henry pay for his role in the collapse of my marriage. I wrote a heartfelt note asking Susan to meet and help me understand Henry's mindset and daily routine. I needed her to become an unwitting informant. Afterward, I headed back to the city to see the divorce lawyer. Armed with the tapes and computer files, I told him everything. I refused any pre-divorce counseling and insisted on splitting everything 50-50ths, including Susan's advance for her novel. I wouldn't agree to alimony or child support. I demanded she give up my last name and that her child not carry my name either. I didn't want my name tarnished. I wrote a large check from my new bank account, not caring about the cost. What I needed was freedom. Freedom from Susan, the marriage, and the hate. Clear-headed, I could focus entirely on making Henry pay. Success was my priority, not time. That night, Susan called. She wanted to talk. We arranged to meet for lunch in our former hometown the next day. I slept well for the first time in months, feeling focused and determined. Susan was now just history. After packing a few things for my upcoming trip, I met Susan at the diner. She looked better, glowing in a modern prenatal dress with a bit of makeup. I wish the child had been mine. Her bruised cheek was still visible, but the waitress seated us in a quiet corner. I approached the conversation cautiously, complimenting her on returning to modern life, though it didn't matter to me anymore. "Ethan," she began, "I want to apologize for how I said things the other day." I replied. Susan, it wasn't how you said it, but what you did. Our divorce is inevitable. You'll receive the paper soon. The divorce will free you to return to Henry or live as a single mom. It also frees me from any obligations to you or Henry's child. I can never forgive your infidelity. I'm trying hard not to hate you. You were a prisoner, but you didn't try to escape. Maybe that was for the best. But what you experienced wasn't entirely like being attacked by a stranger. My mind is still confused. I want you to forgive me for the hateful things I said, I added before she could respond. I'm here to understand your life there, not to talk about Zex. I want to know about your daily routine, Henry's work, the community's name and location. I have no interest in your lovemaking details. We ate in silence until she finished. Then she explained her plans to return to Henry. My warnings about his potential violence had scared her, but she needed to discuss the terms of her return. She also needed to determine if our marriage was truly beyond repair, as her heart was still torn between me and Henry. Her words triggered my anger. Susan, I told you our marriage is over. Your divided heart, my heart is crushed. Your consideration of another man broke us. Infidelity isn't just about Zex. Maybe someday you'll understand the depth of your betrayal. You promised me loyalty in front of everyone. You trashed that for a degree and some wild Zex. I'm no longer part of your future. I shifted the conversation back to my original purpose, asking her about the daily life in Henry's household. She shared everything I wanted to know. I didn't sense any suspicion about my intentions. Henry was religious, superstitious, and a control freak. He took pride in dominating his family and was highly respected by the other men in town. He had frequent Zex with his wives, sometimes 2 or 3 in one night. Susan said she loved trying to keep up with him, likely to goad and humiliate me. It worked, but I didn't comment. I left the diner determined to make Henry pay for his arrogance. Afterward, I visited Susan's mother, who was home from her teaching job. We sat at her kitchen table where I shared the news of Susan's pregnancy. She congratulated us, but her happiness turned to shock as I explained Susan's actions over the past 6 months. Susan's mother was devastated, unaware of the extent of Susan's involvement with her hometown. She viewed their previous escape as a traumatic event, akin to Jews fleeing Auschwitz. Seeing her only child drawn back to that life shattered her. We cried together, united in our shared loss. In that moment, I found some comfort in her presence. As the sun set, long shadows wrapped around us. We stood in a tight embrace, tears flowing, hers dampening my shirt, mine wetting her hair. After what felt like an hour, we finally parted, emotionally drained. She invited me to stay overnight, and I gratefully accepted. The next morning, after breakfast and real coffee, I resumed my drive to my parents' home. I promised to stay in touch with Susan's mom. She was a beautiful person, both inside and out. I couldn't help but notice how much Susan had once resembled her mother, before Henry. My hatred for him grew stronger. On the road, I called my parents, but got no answer. I tried Dad's cell, and he picked up. He and Mom were visiting my brother, so I decided to extend my trip and join them. I hoped the reunion would help stabilize my new life without Susan. I stayed at a motel before reaching my brother's apartment. He had recently returned from Afghanistan, where he served as an infantry company commander. After the usual greetings and hugs, I asked for some family time in the living room. As the day grew late, I suggested ordering pizza, salads, and soft drinks. Once everyone was gathered, I shared the sad news of my impending divorce from Susan. Mom cried, and Dad asked if reconciliation was possible. I started from the beginning, explaining Susan's research project, my work trip, and the changes that followed. We were briefly interrupted when the pizza arrived, but I continued, detailing her pregnancy and the complex situation we found ourselves in. As I spoke, the pain inside me resurfaced, mixing with anger. Mom cried harder, clinging to Dad. Dad, though emotional, held back his tears, but I noticed his trembling hands. My brother remained silent, his military training and battlefield experience evident in his stiff posture. He finally stood up and walked around, deep in thought. When I finished, my brother quietly said, "Ethan, you and I need some time alone. Let's take a walk." He pulled me off the couch and we excused ourselves. We drove to my motel, called the family to let them know we'd be back in an hour or so, and then he began to speak. "Ethan, you're in a war and you might not be prepared. Let me tell you how to fight this battle," he said, taking control of the conversation. "There are rules to follow if you want to win. You may lose Susan, but you don't have to lose the war. Henry is your enemy, and you need to destroy him without suffering heavy losses. I don't need to know your plan now. But after you win, you can tell me. First, know your enemy, his strengths and weaknesses. Then, match your strengths to his weaknesses. Don't let him use his strengths against you or exploit your weaknesses," he continued. "Pick the time and place to strike. Surprise is crucial. If possible, make it a surgical strike. Limit collateral damage. You don't want to hurt innocent people. Plan carefully, keep it secret, and don't let emotions drive your actions. Your plan should be quick and efficient, not drawn out. Remember, success requires more resources than you think you'll need. Good luck, and be careful. Keep this conversation between us. Don't tell mom or dad anything. You're already in the battle, so follow these guidelines." With that, we headed back to his place. The next morning, we had breakfast together, and then mom and dad left for home. I followed them, needing to retrieve something I'd hidden in their attic, something even they didn't know about. I stayed for a few days, sleeping in my old bedroom. Mom gradually recovered, and Dad and I had long talks about my future, though nothing was said about my plans for justice. We just enjoyed being together as a family. Eventually, it was time for me to move on. While Mom and Dad were out shopping, I went to the attic, found what I needed, and loaded it into my SUV. The next day, I hit the road again, heading back to my apartment. My boss had been asking me to go on another expedition, and without Susan, it was easier to accept. I told my parents about the upcoming 2-month trip to the equatorial Atlantic off Africa, but it wouldn't start until I'd used up all my leave time. I had up to 3 months before I had to go. Back in Utah, I put the weapon, still in its boxes, into short-term storage. I knew satellites could track us, so I also picked up some furniture from my former residence to store. Along with the weapon, I accessed satellite maps of the area around Henry's town, studying them intently. I wanted him dead, but more than that, I wanted him to suffer. A quick end of life wouldn't be enough. I wanted to humiliate and degrade him publicly. As I planned, I realized eliminating him outright wasn't enough. He needed to know it was Susan's husband who took him down, but I couldn't leave any evidence. I smiled, imagining him on the receiving end of justice. Susan wasn't getting off scot-free either. I contacted a tough lawyer, recommended by my boss, to threaten the university with a lawsuit. I wanted to make them regret approving Susan's research. I didn't care about the legalities. I just wanted to get their attention. The lawyer sent a letter to the university president and the board of trustees, threatening a $20 million lawsuit. Their response came quickly. Susan's degree hadn't been granted yet, and the board hadn't given final approval. My lawyer demanded that they reject her research entirely and revoke her thesis, with no chance of appeal. In less than 2 weeks, the board passed a resolution instructing the president to correct the department's findings, reprimand those involved, and deny Susan's degree. They even contacted her publisher, forbidding the use of the university's name in connection with her book, and froze her research grant account. I was satisfied. Weeks later, the university couldn't reach Susan to inform her of their decision. They contacted my lawyer, who provided Susan's divorce lawyer's contact info, along with her mother's and Henry's addresses. Susan wasn't at our former home, and I wondered where she was. Despite everything, I still worried about her and her unborn child, though I hated what she'd done. I also had another plan in mind, to send Henry a message from God. I carefully crafted a formal document, styled like the Declaration of Independence, with scripture quotes to intimidate him. After several edits, I printed it on expensive linen paper, placed it in a beautiful holder, and ensured there were no fingerprints. The final product was ready. I was confident that Henry's superstitious beliefs and faith in new revelations and divine visitations would make the document seem like a message from God. I chuckled, feeling good about my plan. I was using my strengths against his weaknesses, just as my brother had advised. I shifted my focus to preparing for my upcoming trips. One was to confront Henry, and then I'd continue to Africa without returning. I planned to be the avenging angel who appeared out of nowhere and vanished without a trace. I loved the idea, but I knew any mistake could spell disaster. To succeed, I needed to study, practice, and maintain complete secrecy. The internet made gathering information easier than going to a library where my actions could be traced. I studied maps and learned the layout of Henry's farmland. I knew what crops he planted when he worked, and where he liked to rest. Satellite photos, far more detailed than public images, showed every detail of the landscape. I knew the perfect spot, a small ridge near a tree by his wheat field, where I could hide and make my move. I was choosing the battlefield, and it was to my advantage. Weeks of intense planning went into this. I studied human anatomy, focusing on how to remove one of Henry's testicles. I wanted to leave him with his sexual drive, but without the ability to satisfy it. A fitting revenge. He had taken my wife, so I would take away his means of sexual satisfaction. The plan felt right, but I knew the risks. I didn't want to end up in prison, so I fine-tuned every detail. I bought supplies from various stores, paying in cash. I even ordered makeup and a fake beard online, along with oversized shoes from a thrift shop. One morning, my lawyer interrupted my planning. Susan had signed the divorce papers and wasn't contesting it. I didn't need to appear in court. The papers were filed, and the 60-day waiting period began. My lawyer informed Susan's lawyer about the university's decision to revoke her degree, and Susan apparently lost it. She was devastated. She'd lost everything, including her degree and reputation. I felt some guilt for hurting her mother, who was collateral damage in all this, but Susan had brought it on herself. Our house sold quickly, and we split the proceeds equally. Susan didn't want to live there, and I didn't care where she went. I had my own future to figure out. Strangely, I lost my desire for sex. My energy was consumed by my project, and I hoped my urges would return later. Susan had been my only partner, and I didn't desire anyone else, not even her anymore. During this time, I stayed in touch with the office and even did some pre-trip planning with my boss. My upcoming trip to Africa would provide a perfect alibi if needed. I confided in my tech-savvy friend who helped me obtain fake passports, IDs, and other essentials. We prepared to leave the country, with him taking my place on the first leg of the trip. Our plan was to switch identities briefly, ensuring I had a solid alibi while I dealt with Henry. Everything was set. My geek friend and I coordinated our timing and flights. I packed my supplies, rented a storage unit, and prepared a rental car. I wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints, and changed into a disguise before heading to Henry's town. I made sure to be seen by locals, but didn't engage with anyone. I believed I saw Susan, but I wasn't sure. If it was her, I hoped she would witness the justice I was about to deliver. Then I left without a word, ready for the final phase of my plan. That night, I took my spot 20 yards from Henry's usual resting place under the lone tree. Hidden under desert camouflage, I checked everything one last time, including the dosage for the dart. The weapon was designed to tranquilize African wildlife, and I loaded it to knock out a 300-pound animal, figuring Henry weighed around 280 pounds. I waited in my white robe, camouflaged, with the document titled, "To Henry, from God, ready." The heat was intense, and I drank lots of water. Just as I predicted, Henry appeared around noon, working the wheat field. He eventually rested under the tree. I aimed at his gluteus maximus and fired the dart. It struck him, and though he swatted it away, it was too late. I emerged from my hiding place, now dressed all in white, without the beard, wanting him to see my face. I had about 20 seconds before he'd be unconscious. Rushing over, I shouted, "Henry, God has heard the cries of Ethan Allen, Susan's real husband. You have sinned, and I am the avenging angel sent to deliver God's punishment." Henry tried to stand but collapsed, his eyes wide with fear. He couldn't speak, and I made sure he saw me clearly before he lost consciousness. No one saw or heard what happened. Though not naturally violent, I had no hesitation now. With Henry unconscious, I acted quickly. Pulling down his coveralls and underwear, I exposed his genitals. After tying a tight ligature around the base, I used a surgical knife to remove most of his johnny, leaving just a small stump. I poured astringent on the wound to stop bleeding. Then, I tied off his testicles, removed one, and secured the other with a cotton string. I placed the removed testicle around his neck as a grim trophy, and put his johnny in a bag with preservative solution. There was minimal bleeding, and I was satisfied with the result. Henry would live, but without his manhood. I left a message between his legs, the written testament of the avenging angel's visit, with his testicle on top as a gruesome display. I didn't stick around to gloat. After collecting everything, I erased any signs of my presence and left, making sure my tracks suggested a different culprit. I carefully disposed of all evidence, burned the clothes and gear, and switched out the car tires before returning the vehicle. I boarded a flight to South Africa using a fake passport, carrying Henry's johnny as a twisted trophy. I was calm, even content as I traveled. My friend and I met in South Africa, exchanged pleasantries, and went our separate ways. While I continued my work in Africa, Susan returned home, depressed and scared of Henry, who had become more violent after losing his manhood. She eventually left him, moved near her mother, and raised her child as a single mother. She never finished her PhD, and though I thought about reconnecting with her, I couldn't face raising Henry's child. On what would have been our 10th anniversary, I sent Susan the preserved phallus as a final gesture. I had moved on with a new life and family. In the end, no one really won. Susan lost her PhD, Henry lost his manhood in Susan, and I lost the woman I once loved.